I hope you all are having a wonderful week. I know that we had an amazing service on Sunday morning as we are still working on transitioning back to in-person worship. We do still have Zoom available, and we have our sanctuary set up to where our Zoom folks can see those attending in the congregation. So for any of you that would like to join us via Zoom, especially if you don't live in the Western Port, Maryland area, go ahead and hit me up. I'd be happy to share our Zoom links. As in the next week ahead, we're going to be seeing more services next week, Thursday, Friday. So stay tuned with us as we head through the remainder part of the Lenten season. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost. To redeem the whole creation, you did not despise the cross. For even in your suffering, you saw the other side. Knowing this was for our salvation, Jesus, for our sake, you died. Powerful lyrics by a song from Hillsong Worship. It's hard to comprehend how God, who loves all of us so much, would be willing to send his son to earth to save us. Jesus of Nazareth endured more than we can ever realize. He knew exactly what was coming. He knew exactly how he would die. And what's worse, he knew that it was not only going to be by the hands of the Roman officials, but worse off, it would be by the hands of the ones he came to save. Over the last several weeks, we have been journeying with Jesus, trying to get a better understanding of the events that led to his death and resurrection. What did Jesus deal with behind the scenes? Jesus is truly the real face of the phrase, no good deed goes unpunished. The religious leaders were set on making sure that the earth would be rid of this man, no matter what he did. Today, we look at the threat, the real threat on Jesus's life. Today's lesson comes from the Gospel according to John, the 11th chapter, verses 45 through 57. Hear these words. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did and believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing? They asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. You all know nothing. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man dies for the people than the whole nation perish. He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. And not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, in order to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and they stood in the temple courts and asked one another, what do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all? But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. Now, to give you a little bit of context of this particular scripture, I need to back up just a little bit. The first part of the Gospel according to John chapter 11 talks about the death of Lazarus and Jesus is raising Lazarus from the dead. This miracle is one of the final foreshadowing moments of Jesus' ministry. This miracle of raising Lazarus was to demonstrate that Jesus would also be raised from the dead. There were many that put their faith in Jesus after he managed to raise Lazarus, who had been dead for 4 days. But there were others that went to the Pharisees to tell them what they saw as if it was a bad thing. This action led to an emergency meeting of the Sanhedrin. Now, for those of you that may not know, the Sanhedrin was the Jewish court system, and it was two different courts. There was one that dealt with the more minor affairs. Think of it like our local courts, okay, like our county courts. And that was made up of 23 elders or rabbis. And the other one was the Jewish Supreme Court. It was the Great Sanhedrin, and it was made up of 71 elders. And these were all appointed to sit as a tribunal in every city in the ancient land of Israel. The Pharisees are seen to almost be blaming themselves at one point for allowing Jesus to perform these good deeds for this long without getting rid of him. Pretty twisted message and thought, if you think about it. What's sad about this is the fact that the Pharisees literally questioned what the Sanhedrin should do about this man who continually performs miracles, when in actuality, what they were actually saying was, what are y'all going to do to stop him? We already know from last week that they tried to capture Jesus, but Jesus managed to slip away. He had this growing popularity among the common people, and this fact that Jesus is following and his popularity among the people, it made it more difficult for the Sanhedrin to arrest him. The more Jesus gained, the more the Jewish leaders opposed him. And really, it was an ego problem. It was an ego problem and a power problem, because they truly thought the more Jesus gained, they were going to lose everything. The Sanhedrin feared that if the Romans thought their leadership over the situation was diminishing, that they would come in and take away their authority. As long as there was an order maintained, the Sanhedrin were allowed to control the Jewish domestic affairs. Jesus was causing a stir to that order, the order the Sanhedrin held. So the Sanhedrin had to do something about it. Now, the chief priest that year, Caiaphas, was the chairman of the Great Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court. Caiaphas made the statement that it's better for one man to die for the people than that a nation perish. Can anyone else hear how messed up that phrase is? Let's take this a little out of religious context. Let's take this just as a human being making this comment. It is better for one man to die than for someone in a power trip to lose their authority. This man literally decided his power as the high priest was more important. He led the council to an understanding. He manipulated this group that if the nation perished because the people were applauding that Jesus was doing good things, that the Sanhedrin would then be powerless and have no one to exercise authority over. Through the statement of Caiaphas, a motion was granted, and the plot to kill Jesus was now allowed to be carried out. What Caiaphas didn't realize was his comment about it being better for one man to die for the people was more than just a statement. He did not realize this statement was not just for his own political selfish interest. God was using him to express the central truth about the death of Christ. Jesus would indeed die for the people, but not just the Jewish people. He would die for all of the scattered children of God. By the death of Jesus, Jesus brought all of the scattered and lost sheep into one fold. Jesus had faced plots of his death before, but until the right time, every single one of the Sanhedrin's plots would fail, and they did. Jesus had strategically been able to slip away or to stay away from regions that he knew had a higher danger. He chose to take his disciples up to the village of Ephraim. Now, this village is located in the mountain countryside just north of Jerusalem. Going to Ephraim was strategic on Jesus' part because it would make it much more difficult for the Sanhedrin to seize him. Jesus remained there until what is known as the appointed time. The Jewish Passover was approaching, which meant many were going to be coming out of the countryside to Jerusalem. Before the Passover, there was a week of ceremonial cleansing that took place. There were many that were hoping to see Jesus during that week of cleansing. Many conversations started taking place among the people as to whether they thought Jesus would or would not be attending. It was no secret that the religious authorities, the religious leaders, were after him. He had become a pretty huge figurehead. Now, you think the fact that there were many talking about the possibility of Jesus' attendance would be a good thing. And on one hand, it was. But the sad part is that there were many that wanted to see him not just because they loved the fact of how he taught, but there were some that did not want to see him because they knew the authorities were hunting for him. So they wanted to see him because they loved his teaching ability. They loved what he did. They loved the good works, but they feared because they knew that he was being hunted. Would Jesus be brave enough to risk appearing at such a major holiday? Knowing that the crowds were hoping to see him, the Pharisees, along with Caiaphas, made a strategy to arrest Jesus. They knew he would probably come to Passover since it was one of the biggest religious holidays. They ordered that if anyone found out where Jesus was, he should report it so that they might arrest him. This wasn't a suggestion, folks. This was an order from the Supreme Court. However, what the Sanhedrin, what Caiaphas himself did not realize was that their timing didn't matter. God's timing did. These religious leaders came together. These religious leaders plotted to destroy a man for doing what they should have been doing all along. One man specifically was willing to kill someone just for the sake of not losing his own authority or his power over people. This is a lesson in how to get away with murder. You get the right people around you that you can manipulate to believe that what you are saying is 100% true. You give them a reason that also makes you more applicable to them, which comes down to Caiaphas reminding the rest of the Sanhedrin that the Romans would take over if Jesus becomes more popular than them, which meant they would lose their authority over all of the Jews. We see this exact same behavior happening in the world today. And if you don't, I highly recommend opening your eyes. There are those that have claimed to be Christ followers, but have turned away from scriptural teachings and have gone for their own wants, needs, in order to gain a following and to gain power. This is a larger problem in the world, and it's not just a religious problem. Jesus had to fight this type of attitude his entire life and his entire ministry. He stood his ground. He pushed for what was right no matter what he faced. There will be people that will plot against you. There will be people that may think you shouldn't be able to do something only for the fact that they can't do it. Most of what we hear comes down to jealousy and ego. Unfortunately, during this time of Lent, during this story, we're getting closer to Easter, which means we're also getting closer to the end of the beginning. I hope all of you will have a great rest of the week.